free 9 more. 40 years before this, Abdul Rahman had traveled up the Mississippi to Natchez in the hold of a schooner. On April 8, 1828, he headed upriver again, this time in the cabin of a steamboat, a transportational marvel invented during his years of bondage. His ultimate destination was Africa, as Marchok and Clay had promised Foster, but Rahman had his own priorities. For him, a more important obligation took precedence over the agreement among Foster, Marchok, and Clay. The obligation to redeem his children from slavery trumped everything. Redemption cost money. Abdul Rahman was going up the Mississippi to find a way to secure the necessary funds. He steamed first to Louisville, then to Cincinnati. From Cincinnati, he headed north onto the Ohio River to Wheeling, Virginia, then by stagecoach to Baltimore along the route now followed by Interstate 68. At each stop, he called on town leaders, giving them letters of introduction penned by Marchok. More than once, he walked the streets soliciting contributions. In the 8 months while the heat of a presidential election rose around him, Abdul Rahman raised $3,000, money that ultimately freed all but one of his children. In Baltimore, he met Henry Clay, who was busy campaigning for president in the election. Clay urged him on to Washington, D.C. The Washington Abdul Rahman visited on a rainy day in May 1828 was one of the smaller cities on his tour, just a quarter the size of Baltimore and very much a work in progress. Struggling out hither and thither, wrote a visitor from Philadelphia just a few years later, with a small house or two a quarter of a mile from any other. After 30 years as capital of a young nation, Washington was home to the great domed U.S. Capitol and the White House, and to the largest slave market in North America. Rahman secured an appointment with the president, called on John Quincy Adams, at the White House. The meeting was cordial, but when Rahman asked directly for the president's help in redeeming his children and grandchildren from slavery, Adams was sympathetic but non-committal. From the White House, Abdul Rahman went next door to the State Department to meet with Clay. Clay was cordial too, offering Rahman the hospitality of his own home, but like Adams, he made no decision on the redemption of the former slave's family. After just a few days in Washington, Rahman returned to Baltimore, then traveled north, bound for Philadelphia and Boston. Natchez received word of Rahman's fundraising campaign with displeasure. Marchok had personally vouched for Abdul Rahman's character and for his desire to return immediately to Africa. Foster was incensed. Had not Clay given his word that Rahman would be at liberty only in Africa, not in the U.S.? I consider the contract entered into by Clay entirely violated, he wrote. Back in New England, Rahman continued his resolute canvassing for assistance. In Hartford, he met Reverend Thomas Gallaudet, later the benefactor of education for the deaf, who took up his cause. From his pulpit, Gallaudet preached the importance of Abdul Rahman's return to Africa. It would seem as if Providence had taken him under his peculiar care and destined him to be the means of opening into the very interior of Africa a wide and ineffectual door for the diffusion of the gospel. I think I see Africa, he told another audience, pointing to the tablet of eternal justice, making us Americans tremble, while the words are pronounced, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Galaudet's patronage re-energized the movement in support of Rahman's mission. From Hartford, Rahman went to New Haven, then to New York. Wherever he went, Gallaudet wrote letters of introduction to philanthropists and advocates of colonization. Prominent men agreed to contribute and to initiate arrangements for Abdul Rahman's voyage. From New York, he traveled to Philadelphia, where he marched with Philadelphia Free Blacks in the New Year's Day parade. From Philadelphia, it was back to Baltimore. By now, his time in the United States was drawing to a close. Andrew Jackson had won the 1828 election. Inauguration day would end the terms of Adams and Clay, and Rahman had been warned that Jackson's new pro-slavery White House might actually return him to Natchez. On January 21st, 1829, almost a year after leaving Mississippi, he and Isabella boarded the steamboat Virginia. After stopping to pick up 15 freed people, the Virginia proceeded to Norfolk, the point of embarkation for the voyage to Liberia. There, Abdul Rahman and his traveling companions from the Virginia joined 136 other free blacks on board the Harriet bound for Africa. On February 7th, less than a month before Inauguration Day, the Harriet cast off. On his return crossing, Rahman traveled not in the cargo hold but in the Harriet's best cabin, a guest of the government of the United States. After 38 days, the Harriet sailed into the harbor of Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. Hundreds of settlers welcomed the new arrivals as they disembarked. 41 years after being abducted, Rahman was back in Africa. This is the epilogue. No man can step into the same river twice, said the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, because neither the man nor the river remains the same. The man who returned to Africa in 1828 was not the same man who left in 1788, and the continent to which he returned was not the place he had been from. Facing a seasonal delay before he could travel from Monrovia, the capital of Liberia, to Timbo, his home in Futa-Jalon, Rahman set about planning his future. He hoped in Timbo to complete his goal of buying his children's freedom and bring them to Africa. He took seriously the dreams of the many businessmen who had contributed to his journey. I shall try to bring my countrymen to the colony, Liberia, and to try to open the trade, he wrote in a letter home. He hoped to divert at least some portion of food of the Johns trade from British Sierra Leone to American Liberia. A supporter raised $500 for Abdul Rahman to travel on his birthplace and began to lay the foundations for this trade. Mid-May brought the seasonal rains. After 4 decades in the dry climate of Mississippi, Rahman was no longer used to the night chills that accompanied the monsoon and penetrated the bamboo walls of his makeshift cottage. 40 years of slavery had weakened his constitution too. June brought diarrhea, but he failed to consult a doctor. As with many elderly people, the illness sapped his strength. On July 6, 1829, at the age of 67, Rahman died in Monrovia. That same year, Thomas Foster also died. The fate of these two men could not be more ironic. While Rahman received a long obituary of the news of his death, Foster, the man of power and accomplishment, received no mention in the local Mississippi papers. After his death, Foster's holdings, including his slaves, were divided among his children. All but one descendant agreed to sell Rahman's children into freedom, except for one son, Prince. All were freed and joined them over in Monrovia. The story of the prince is far from over. In April 2003, the first reunion of Abdul Rahman's Liberian and American families were held in Natchez, Mississippi, as part of a celebration of the 175th anniversary of his liberation. There, Dr. Boubacar Bari, an African descendant from Timbo, or for Senegambia and the Atlantic slave trade, and a project advisor, made a presentation to his oldest living American relative. When they enslaved us, Parry said, the first thing they did was take our sandals. Then, handing the American relative a gift of sandals made in Timbo, he said, here are yours back, that you may come and visit us someday. I hope that you've enjoyed this. So please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. If you've got any ideas for other videos, please let me know in the comments. Hey people, this is a story I found on Wikipedia from history.